The moment I got the divorce certificate, Tina slid a bank card over to me. "Child support, I'll transfer it to you monthly," she said, as casually as if she were mentioning the weather. I didn't even lift my eyes, just flicked my finger, and the card slid back, knocking against the sleeve of her expensive silk shirt. "No need. I'm walking away with nothing," I replied. "I'll take care of all our child's expenses myself." The air went still. For the first time, Tina's usually composed eyes showed clear shock. I guess she thought I'd beg, try to negotiate for more for our son. After all, I'd been a stay-at-home dad reliant on her for 7 years, cut off from the world, with no income. Leaving with nothing? It was like setting myself up for disaster. Even the staff aiding us with the processing couldn't help but glance at me, wondering if I'd lost my mind. Tina frowned, slightly annoyed. "Frank, don't be stubborn. You have the kid, no job, how are you going to manage?" "That's my problem." I stood up, folded my share of the divorce agreement, and slipped it into the familiar, worn canvas bag. "Tina, from now on, we're done." I took our son Jimmy's hand, straightened my back, and walked out the door of the Civil Affairs office. The sunlight was a bit harsh. Behind me, I could still feel her heavy gaze, tinged with confusion and scrutiny. My best friend William came to pick me up, launching into a tirade the moment he saw me. "Frank, have you lost your mind? Walking away with nothing? You think you're some saint? Tina was the one who cheated. She's the one at fault. Why aren't you taking a dime? Jimmy's education, medical bills, everything needs money. How are you going to support him?" On air, thankfully, Jimmy was busy with his toys in the car seat and didn't hear a thing. I leaned back in the passenger seat, closing my eyes in exhaustion. William's words were like little daggers, piercing through with each sentence. "Still have feelings for her? Huh? Can't bear to see her in pain? Wake up. She brought that pretty boy Alexander into your home. In your own bed. What's left to hold on to?" A sharp pang hit my chest. That rainy night flashed back in unexpected clarity. Our son had a fever, and I couldn't reach Tina. I drove through the rain to the hospital, only to remember halfway that I'd forgotten his medical records, so I turned back. The house was brightly lit. At the entrance, a man's polished shoes were tangled with Tina's high heels. Through the partially open bedroom door, indecent sounds of breathing and laughter spilled out. "Tina, when are you kicking that freeloader out? I hate sneaking around every time. Why rush? I need him to look after Jimmy a bit longer. Divorcing now would just make him fight for assets. It's too much hassle. Please, you're just going soft. What's he going to claim? Jimmy is yours, you've nothing to fear. Offer him a bit of child support and done." "Okay, babe, stop it. He's not like you." I stood in the cold hallway, holding our feverish son, listening to my wife and that man talk about me, calling me a freeloader and a worthless man. Rainwater dripped from my hair and face, soaking my thin t-shirt, chilling me to the bone. In my arms, our son was murmuring, "Dad, cold." At that moment, my heart was even colder than my wet clothes, utterly frozen. I didn't burst in, didn't scream or fight. Calmly, I turned away with my son and drove to the hospital. Once my son was settled and hooked up to N4, I finally went to the hospital restroom, retching silently until I dry-heaved bile. From that day, the Frank who lived for Tina and gave up his career for family was gone. The only thought left was, I needed to leave and make sure Tina paid the ultimate price. Leaving with nothing? I opened my eyes, looking at the rapidly vanishing scenery outside, my voice steady. "I'm not saying her money's dirty, William. I'm saying I don't want it." William was taken aback, but then even angrier. "Dirty money? You'd still better take it. Money doesn't get tainted. It's what you need. It doesn't matter how self-righteous you feel. What about Jimmy? You gonna feed him air?" I turned to him, forcing a pale smile, my gaze sharper than ever. "Don't worry. Jimmy's not going to be feeding on air. Every cent of Tina's money will come back to me, clean, in another form." William, stunned by the chill in my eyes, mumbled, "You're insane. Really insane." He dropped me at my temporary, run-down studio apartment, helping with the only 2 suitcases I brought. The place was tiny, walls peeling, furniture old, with a faint smell of mold. Compared to Tina's luxurious villa, this wasn't even servant quarters. "Frank, are you sure you want to live here? Come on, crash at my place for a while," William urged, concern lining his face. "No need. This place is perfect," I replied, placing Jimmy on the creaky bed. "It's quiet, cheap, close to the preschool. Most importantly, no trace of Tina and Alexander here." William sighed, handing me a card. "Hey, it's my savings, not much, but take it in case. I'll look out for work. But, after 7 years, thanks," I didn't refuse accepting it. "He's a true friend. I'll find the work. Don't worry about me." After William left, I sat in the only stable chair, looking around our small home. Jimmy was asleep, cheeks flushed red. I took out my phone, opening a secure album. Inside weren't any sweet memories, but a collection of photos and screenshots. Photos of Tina and Alexander being all cozy at different places, some taken by a photographer I hired, others that Alexander posted on his low-key social media without thinking. I stumbled upon them. There are also a few recordings. "Tina, can you approve my cousin's project? It's not much, just $3 million as startup capital." "Sure, have her make the proposal presentable. I'll bring it up at next week's meeting." "Sweetheart, I found a watch I love. It's a new model and super hard to get. Buy it. Use my secondary card." "Tina," Frank seems to have sensed something. The way he looked at me today was odd. "Ignore him. He's just a house husband who can't make waves. If he dares to cause trouble, I'll throw him out." Tina's voice was chillingly cold. "This is the woman I loved for 10 years and married for 7. To her, I'm just a useless obstacle she can toss out whenever she likes." I turned off my phone and walked to the window. The city's neon lights flickered in the distance, failing to shine into my small, shabby room. Tina, Alexander. The game's just begun. Leaving empty-handed comes at a big cost. I've got only $20K that William gave me and a bit of secret savings, adding up to less than $50K. I paid 3 months' rent and a deposit, Jimmy's next quarter of preschool fees, and bought some necessities. The money disappeared like water. I need to find a job, fast. Reality slapped me hard pretty quickly. 7 years out of work made my resume sink like a stone. Better jobs didn't even offer interviews. The ones willing to hire me were for intense, low-paying work like sorting packages or waiting tables at restaurants. The hours made juggling picking up Jimmy tough, too. After 2 weeks of chasing jobs, I finally landed a gig as an all-purpose clerk at a small trading company. $3,500 a month, 1 day off a week, 9 to 6, sometimes overtime. That money's really tight to support Jimmy and me in a city where prices are sky high. Every day felt like a battle. Up at 6 a.m., made breakfast for Jimmy, took him to preschool, and squished onto the subway for over an hour to get to the office. The clerk work was endless and busy, copying, running errands, ordering food, sorting never-ending documents. The old computer was as slow as a snail, and the supervisor always found faults. Most coworkers were young women who seemed to meet my older, new in town, with kid self with some mix of sympathy or slight judgment. After work, I'd squeeze onto the subway again to pick Jimmy up, usually reaching home by 8 p.m. Rush to cook, play with the kid a bit, get him to sleep. Only then I could open my laptop to look for part-time gigs online. I picked up some translation jobs, paid by the 1,000 words, often staying up until past midnight or the early hours. Life felt pretty bleak. Sometimes I'd see Tina in the business news. Her company snatched yet another massive project, valuations climbing by billions, looking all pompous. Or on Alexander's social media, practically gloating to the world about his rise, showing off new sports cars, watches, and hanging out at high-end clubs or foreign vacation spots. His captions always went, "Grateful for the light in my life. Meeting the best you, Tina." Followers sang praises about their match and how lucky Tina was. Blindingly obnoxious. Once, I took Jimmy to the amusement park, and there they were, Tina and Alexander. Jimmy's sharp eyes spotted them, excitedly pointing, "Daddy, there's Mommy." He broke free from my hand, sprinting toward them like a happy little bird. Tina saw us, her brows instantly furrowed, eyes full of unmistakable discontent and disdain. She yanked a happily running over Jimmy to a stop with an awkwardness like dealing with a distant relative's kid. Alexander stood beside her, in the latest street fashion, wearing a watch worth tens of thousands, showing off both style and arrogance. He looked down at me, curling his lips into a victor's smirk, laced with pity. "Frank, here to let Jimmy have some fun?" His voice was sly and mocking. "This place suits you guys. Down to earth." He hooked his arm around Tina's. "Tina, let's go. Our reservation's coming up. Michelin 3-star, the seats were so hard to get." Tina nodded, bent down, took out a few $100 bills from her wallet, and shoved them into Jimmy's hand, her tone indifferent. "Here, go play." Then, without another glance at me, she turned on her heel with Alexander and walked off. With money in hand, Jimmy's smile slowly faded, big eyes full of tears, looking all confused and upset as his mom and the fashionable uncle walked away. He didn't understand why Mommy didn't want him and Daddy anymore. At that moment, my heart felt like it was being shredded by a dull knife. Not for Tina's coldness, but for my son. I knelt down, tightly hugged Jimmy, forcing my tears back. "It's okay, Jimmy. Mommy's busy with work. Daddy's here to play with you. Daddy will get you the biggest transformer. Okay?" Jimmy buried his face in my shoulder, his little shoulders shaking, mumbling, "Okay." Jimmy just wants Daddy. Watching Tina and Alexander disappear into the crowd, the final bit of warmth in my heart snuffed out completely, replaced with ice-cold, burning hatred. Tina, Alexander. The higher you rise now, the harder you'll fall later. Time crept by as I plowed through my monotonous grind and gritted teeth perseverance. By day, silent and diligent jack of all trades Frank at the company. By night, single dad burning the midnight oil for translation gigs. Weekends, I took Jimmy to various free parks and libraries. Life was tough, but our little nest slowly felt homier. I used cheap fabric to make curtains and tablecloths and planted potholes in discarded little flower pots. Jimmy grew sensible, asking about Mommy less and less. My job showed a glimmer of a break. An old sales guy at the company quit, and since my boss noticed I was dependable and knew some English, he let me try managing some basic client orders. Even though I only got a symbolic raise of $500, I got closer to the core business and saw more opportunities. I threw myself into learning, soaking up knowledge like a dry sponge. Products, processes, pricing, negotiation skills. I was organizing documents while others were off work. On weekends, when others relaxed, I stayed home studying industry reports and competitor info. Then the chance finally came. The company had been trying to secure a client from Northern Europe, but their high demands and low prices kept stalling negotiations. The manager was stressed out. I studied every piece of public information and past purchasing records of this client. I found out they had an unwavering commitment to sustainability and environmental issues, a perfect match for a new product we had. Previous proposals focused on pricing advantages and overlooked this aspect. I pulled 2 all-nighters and put together a detailed proposal. The focus wasn't on cutting prices, but on using data to show how our new product aligned perfectly with their sustainability goals, could save them money and boost their brand image long-term. Nervously, I handed the proposal to our manager. He looked at it, then at me, for a long 30 seconds with a complex expression. "Frank, I didn't know you had this in you." In the end, the company adopted my suggestion and switched our negotiation strategy. After some back and forth, we actually landed that tough client. Even though I was just the executor and the main credit went to the manager and business director, the manager couldn't quite look at me the same way. He moved me from doing odd jobs to the business department fringe, giving me a business assistant title and raising my salary to $5,000. More importantly, I gained access to deeper company networks and resources. At a small industry networking event, I unexpectedly ran into someone familiar. Emily. She was my university senior and the debate team captain back then. A star back then with a good family background and strong capabilities. She went abroad for further studies and I heard she's been doing great. She hadn't changed much, just more composed and professional. wearing a sharp dark business suit and still standing out in a crowd. She recognized me first and seemed surprised. "Frank, is that you?" I felt a bit awkward. My discounted suit bought just for the event looked cheap in front of her. "Emily, long time no see." She looked me over with warmth and concern, no hint of belittlement. "I heard you got married later? How's life?" I tried to sound casual, smiling slightly. "Divorced. Starting over with my son." Her eyes showed a flick of understanding and perhaps a trace of pity. She didn't probe further, just handed me a business card. "I started a small investment company now. If you need any help, reach out anytime." No need to stand on ceremony among old classmates. I took the high-quality card that read Q capital Emily. A thought quietly sprouted in my mind. I didn't contact Emily right away. I knew I had no leverage yet. I needed to build up, wait for the right moment. Days went by in busyness. I gradually solidified my position in the company, moving from assistant to junior account executive, with a salary increase to over $7,000. Coupled with freelance translation work, though money was still tight, I no longer worried about Jimmy's formula and tuition fees. I moved from a one-bedroom apartment to a slightly bigger two-bedroom with a small balcony. Jimmy got his own room and was thrilled. But news about Tina and Alexander kept cropping up. In financial news, Tina's company was surging, its valuation skyrocketing. In tabloids and social media, Alexander shone as the most noticeable man behind a successful woman, flaunting luxurious living and Tina's doting. Their success only tightened the string in my heart. I knew Alexander's greed and Tina's growing arrogance from success were the perfect catalysts. My investment was finally showing signs of return. First, an issue cropped up with a raw materials procurement project overseen by Alexander's cousin, who Tina placed as deputy manager in the purchasing department. The materials were subpar, overpriced, leading to serious quality problems in a batch of products. Customers demanded compensation and the company suffered a significant loss. Tina was furious. A thorough check directly implicated Alexander's cousin for pocketing funds. Alexander pleaded on behalf of his cousin, promising he wasn't involved, waiting outside Tina's office for an entire afternoon, explaining how his cousin was young and foolish and got manipulated. Eventually, out of consideration for Alexander, Tina didn't call the police, but she fired his cousin and recovered some losses. But this incident planted a thorn in the company executives' and shareholders' minds, tarnishing Alexander's helpful image. This was just an appetizer. The real drama unfolded a month later. Tina's company was bidding for a large government-led infrastructure project. Securing it was crucial. It would elevate the company's scale and influence. Confident of success, Tina invested significant resources. However, just before the bid, a rival company released a detailed technical proposal and pricing analysis. This analysis accurately targeted the weaknesses and cost vulnerabilities of Tina's company's proposal. The company's core secrets were leaked. The bid failed miserably, the preliminary investment washed away, the company's reputation damaged, and its stock price plummeted. Tina was furious and ordered a search for the mole. After much investigation, all clues subtly pointed towards Alexander. Someone anonymously reported seeing Alexander frequently meeting with a female director from a rival company during the critical bidding period. Others provided blurry surveillance snapshots showing Alexander accessing the secure archive at midnight with the access card of a former employee. Alexander was utterly shaken. He dashed to Tina, crying and swearing he was innocent and framed. "Tina, you gotta believe me. How could I ever betray you? Everything I have is because of you. Why would I do such a thing?" Tina's face was ashen, her eyes colder and more scrutinizing than ever. "Then how do you explain the surveillance footage? Explain your meetings with Mr. Wong? I was trying to get some intel for you. The access card, I found it on the ground and got curious." Alexander's weak explanation fell flat. Just then, Tina's assistant walked in looking grim and handed her a file. "Tina, the tech department recovered deleted emails from Alexander's private account. Take a look." Tina's pupils dilated as she read it. The email was from Alexander to an anonymous overseas account, just days before the bidding. The attachment was deleted, But the email said, "Data sent. Please deposit the balance as agreed into the following account," followed by an overseas bank account number. That account, after initial tracking, was linked to a shell company secretly tied to Alexander's mother's family. The evidence was undeniable. A loud slap echoed as Tina's hand struck Alexander's face. Shaking with rage, her eyes red, she pointed to the door. Her voice squeezed out from between clenched teeth. "Get out. Get out right now. If I see you again, you'll rot in jail." Stunned by the slap, Alexander clutched his face in disbelief, trying to plead with Tina. Two security guards, who heard the commotion, dragged him out. His cries echoed in the hallway. Tina collapsed into her chair, covering her face with her hands. Company secrets leaked, core projects failed, stock prices plunged. Shareholders blamed her. Banks demanded repayment. The crisis at home was compounded by the man she trusted most, stabbing her in the back. She was beset from within and without. Her company was teetering on the edge. The crisis was snowballing, growing bigger and bigger. The leak causing the bid failure was just the fuse. Soon, tax authorities came for an audit. Newspapers broke the story about a safety issue in one of her company's real estate projects, leading to a halt and rectification order. The financial chain tightened suddenly. Shareholders panicked and began selling off their stocks, causing the share price to plummet dramatically. Sensing risk, banks tightened credit lines and even demanded repayment of previous loans. Everyone jumped on the bandwagon when the chips were down. Tina was overwhelmed, running around trying to secure funding to douse the flames. But at this critical juncture, her company's risk rating was lowered, and former partners kept their distance. Her mansions and luxury cars were listed for seizure by the banks. Once glorious, Tina was now on the brink of bankruptcy within months. And I, like a patient spider, quietly watched my web tighten from the shadows. Emily called me just at this point. "Frank," her voice was steady over the line, "Tina's company won't last past the end of the month. That's the bank's last deadline. She's selling off all her properties and stocks at a low price to make a final attempt." I replied, my heart beating steadily in my chest. "Are you ready?" Emily asked. I looked at my computer screen, seeing a long string of numbers in a secret offshore account I'd set up. It was what I'd painstakingly transferred and accumulated over 3 years, like moving ants, through legitimate channels. The source? Of course, it came from the tiny grains of sand quietly siphoned from Tina's vast assets before I left the marriage. For instance, high-value but inconspicuous retirement insurances and trust funds bought during the marriage, liquidated or pledged through complex financial maneuvers. Or the small properties Tina gifted me early on but long forgotten by her, mortgaged before the real estate boom, to fund some high-risk but potentially high-reward investments. Also, the large supplementary card she opened for me, letting me shop as I pleased. After Alexander came into the picture, I rarely used it, but she forgot to cancel it and never checked the statements closely. For years, this card saw several large monthly outflows to accounts of shell companies I controlled, under the guise of high-end home consultants and private nutrition planning. This money ultimately pooled into my secret account. Besides, in its early days, to evade taxes, Tina's company paid a portion of its profits as consultancy fees to overseas affiliated companies. I inadvertently gained control over one such shell company, and this money also became my reserve fund. All these operations were discreet and scattered, like trickling streams in Tina's ocean of wealth. Combined with my magnanimous image of waiving asset division during the divorce and my later portrayal as a struggling single dad, no one would suspect this ex-husband with nothing to his name held the key to undermining her foundations. "I'm ready," I calmly answered Emily. "Good." Emily replied decisively, "I'll step in under the guise of Q Capital to purchase her core assets and stocks at a low price. Follow through with the plan on your end." "Thank you." "Don't thank me, Frank. It's what you deserve, and it's your own strategy. I'm just building the bridge." Emily paused, her voice softening. "How's Jimmy?" "He's doing great. Thanks for asking." I hung up and walked toward the window. Outside, light rain was falling, pitter-pattering. Over 3 years of patience, countless sleepless nights of endurance, We're finally about to pay off. Tina, your reckoning has come. The announcement of Tina's company's bankruptcy topped the financial headlines. The once glorious business queen had fallen dramatically. Her mansions, luxury cars, and jewelry were all seized for auction by the banks. As the saying goes, when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Alexander disappeared completely after the scandal. It's said he took off with the last bit of cash and jewelry from Tina's safe and fled abroad. Nobody knows where he is. Before leaving, he even posted a message on social media, visible only to Tina. Tina, I'm sorry, but I really need the money to start over. Forget about me. Tina lost everything and was left with massive debts. She rented a dingy, damp apartment in the city, surviving on odd jobs. Once confident and stylish, Tina now looked plain and worn out, wearing cheap, faded t-shirts, blending in with the crowd. As for me, thanks to Emily's maneuvering, I acquired the core technology patents, brand value, and key real estate properties of Tina's company at a bargain price. Q Capital came out as the biggest winner, and Emily quickly rose to prominence in the investment world. Of course, the biggest winner was me. A new kingdom, Frank's kingdom, rose from the ruins of Tina's vast business empire. I moved out of our 2-bedroom apartment, taking Jimmy to a top-tier downtown flat. The view of the shining city skyline stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Jimmy got his own Lego room and a dedicated nanny. I became a partner at Q Capital, with Emily giving me the respect and say I deserved. Life changed dramatically. One rainy afternoon, the doorbell rang. The nanny answered the door, surprised. "Who are you looking for?" I was sitting on the carpet in the living room, playing with blocks with Jimmy, and looked up at the sound. Standing at the door was Tina. She had lost a lot of weight, her cheeks sunken, her once neat hair now messy on her shoulders, her cheap jacket half soaked by the rain, speckled with mud. She held a plastic bag with a few wrinkled apples inside. She stared at the spacious, bright, elegantly furnished living room, at me in soft home clothes, looking healthy and at peace, with a complex expression in her eyes. Shock, confusion, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of regret and pain. "Frank," she croaked, her voice hoarse like an old bellows. Seeing her, Jimmy instinctively hugged me tighter, whispering, "Mom?" His voice was filled with unfamiliarity and a hint of fear. Tina's gaze fell on our son, her lips trembling, her eyes instantly red. "Jimmy," she wanted to step forward. I stood up, calmly shielding Jimmy behind me, and looked at her without emotion. "What do you want?" Tina froze at my indifferent gaze, standing awkwardly on the glossy entrance floor, rainwater dripping from her pants, leaving dark stains contrasting with the sophisticated surroundings. She swallowed hard, awkwardly and humbly offering the plastic bag forward. "I saw a fruit store on the way. The apples looked good. I got some for Jimmy." Her voice was dry. The nanny stood aside, eyes filled with a wary look and a barely noticeable disdain. I didn't take the bag, just said flatly, "Jimmy eats organic fruits now with meals prepared by a nutritionist. You should keep those for yourself." Tina's hand stiffened mid-air, the plastic bag crinkling softly. All color drained from her face, leaving it ashen. She slowly pulled back her hand, the bag hanging by her side, looking at me like a fish on the brink of death. "Frank, I know I let you down, and Jimmy too." Her voice choked. "I was awful, I was a fool, I'm not even human. It's all in the past." I cut her off, my tone unruffled. "It's not over. Frank, I can't move on." Tina suddenly grew agitated, stepping forward, rain and mud marking the floor more clearly. "Every day I regret it. Regret being blinded by Alexander. Regret treating you like that. Regret losing Jimmy. Frank, I was wrong. I really was. I'm begging you, give me another chance. Let's start over. I swear I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you and Jimmy." Her tears mixed with rain, face filled with painful humility, desperately pleading. Had I seen her like this 3 years ago, I might have softened, might have hurt. But now, inside me was only a cold, silent calm. "Start over?" I echoed softly, even a faint, mocking smile played at my lips. Tina, do you really think that's possible? I looked at her, every word distinct. Have you forgotten? When we divorced, you told me yourself I was just a stay-at-home husband, wouldn't make waves, and should just leave. And you, hugging Alexander, complained about the down-to-earth places I took Jimmy, insisting on Michelin-starred restaurants. When Jimmy cried for his mom, where were you? Buying Alexander a watch? Whispering that I wasn't worthy of sharing your money. My questions pinned Tina in place, her face paper white, her body wavering. Tina, I interrupted again, voice low but with unquestionable finality. What's done is done. A broken mirror can't be mended. Everything ended the moment you chose to betray me and Jimmy. I gestured towards the door. This is Jimmy's and my home. You're not welcome here. Please leave. The light in Tina's eyes went out completely. Despair engulfed her. She stared at me as if truly seeing the man before her for the first time. The husband who once relied on her, revolved around her, had transformed utterly. Her lips moved, and finally she asked, in a hoarse voice, the question that had haunted her, driving her nearly mad. Did you know? When you walked away with nothing, was it on purpose? About Alexander, the company, did you? She didn't finish, but the fear and need for confirmation in her eyes said it all. I offered neither denial nor confirmation. She just slightly lifted her chin, revealing a smile honed in the business world, calm to the point of being ruthless. Tina, the business world is like a battlefield. All's fair in love and war. You taught me that back in the day. You taught me one thing: never trust your fate to someone's conscience. As for anything else, I paused, my tone indifferent. Does it matter? What matters is everything you have now legally belongs to me and Jimmy. Everything you once prided yourself on. Tina looked like she'd been hit by a lightning bolt. She staggered back, leaning against the cold door frame to keep from falling. The look in her eyes was full of horror, despair, and a trace of spine-chilling fear. Her last shred of hope was shattered. She lost completely, not to an opponent, not to Alexander's betrayal, but to the ex-husband she never really looked at, thought she could manipulate and discard. She lost so thoroughly, there wasn't even a chance to turn things around. She turned around, trance-like, walking into the rain outside like a hollow shell, stumbling with every step, her figure hunched, utterly defeated. I closed the door, locking out the damp and cold. I turned and picked up Jimmy. Dad, what happened to Mom? Jimmy asked softly. Your mom. I kissed his soft cheek, my voice gentle but firm. She took the wrong path and can't turn back. What about us? Us. I held Jimmy and walked toward the big floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city freshly cleaned by the rain, bright and clear under the sun. Sunlight pierced through the clouds, casting a golden glow everywhere. Our path is ahead. The doorbell rang again. The nanny answered it, and I heard her respectful voice. Emily, you're here. Emily walked in, wearing a sharply tailored dark gray trench coat, standing tall with a fancy cake box in hand. Her face carried a gentle smile, her eyes resting on Jimmy and me. Didn't break my promise to bring Jimmy's strawberry cake, did I? She waved the box at Jimmy. Jimmy immediately slipped from my arms, cheering as he ran over. Emily. Emily bent down, scooping Jimmy up with a warm smile. She held Jimmy and stood by me at the window, watching the magnificent city skyline. All taken care of? She asked softly, concern quietly evident in her gaze. Yeah. I nodded. She won't be back. Emily fell silent for a moment, looking out where Tina vanished, now just traffic and people flowing by. Do you hate her? She asked. I exhaled lightly, gazing at the bright sun outside. Once I hated her with a passion. But now, I paused, feeling Jimmy's warm little body leaning on me, looking at Emily's steady presence, then at our clean, hopeful new home. Now I realize, hating her too long isn't worth it. Emily turned to me, a light flickering in her eyes. Frank, have you thought about? Her voice was soft, holding an almost imperceptible mix of nerves and hope, giving Jimmy a complete family? And a fresh start for yourself? Jimmy, holding onto Emily's neck, curiously glanced between us. I was a bit taken aback. A new beginning? I looked into Emily's sincere eyes, then down at Jimmy's little face, full of reliant trust. Then, looking beyond them, I turned my gaze outside again. The city thrived under the sun. The past felt like a long, cold, wet nightmare. But now morning had come. I turned back to meet Emily's hopeful gaze, slowly breaking into a clear, bright smile, free of restraints. Emily, I extended my hand, gently taking Jimmy's little hand as well, as if grasping a hopeful, weighty future. Shall we walk this future road together?